Hello, everyone. Can't see any of you, but I trust there's people there. It's a pleasure to join you today virtually from the throes of my COVID-19 sickbed. I am very ill right now, so please bear with me if I'm being a bit slow or if I'm not speaking loud enough. Before I begin, I would just love to thank the cinema and Silja for their really kind hospitality and for facilitating this special program, and indeed everyone for coming out this evening to enjoy these two really excellent films. So they're two very interesting and also quite challenging artist films by Alaa Mansour and Bahar Noorizadeh, and I will briefly introduce my practice first and then introduce the artists and their films. They're not narrative films, so hopefully there won't be any spoilers. But yeah, I hope many of you will stay for the Q&A where we'll have an opportunity to informally discuss the films. So as briefly introduced by Silja, my name is Róisín. I am a film curator, programmer, I'm a writer at Freeze Magazine, and I'm a PhD candidate at St. Andrews University, and I'm based in London. I've initiated many film and video organizations concerning Swana cinema, so cinema from Southwest Asia, North Africa, the decolonial term used to refer to the geography more commonly known as Middle East, North Africa. The two most well-known organizations, I guess, are Hadibi Collective and Shasha Movies, which I'll talk very briefly about. So Hadibi Collective supports women's video and cinema from the region and the diaspora, and this is across film programming, fundraising, education, production, workshopping, and development. So to give an example of one of the projects we're running, just last month, we launched a large-scale project in Iraq, and we basically organized screenings of Europa, which was the Iraq's entry to the Oscars, and Maysoon Pachachi's new film, and also some really beautiful films about the marshes. We screened them in Baghdad and Mosul. And then we led development labs, development workshops by leading figures in the Iraqi film industry, such as Mohaned Hayal, Zahra Khandour, and Hala Al Salman. And then we offered micro grants to those who attended the workshops in order to support the production of their short films. So that's like an example of one of the projects, the kind of projects we run with Hadibi Collective. Shasha, I launched last year, and it's the first independent streaming service for Southwest Asia and North African cinema. And it's run by a small team of women from the region. So each month we present 20 very carefully curated and rarely screened films, which are accessible globally. We don't really geoblock. I encourage you all to subscribe. This month, our program is called Film on Film, and it explores screen and cinema cultures in the region with work by Rania Stephen, Basma Al-Sharif, Kamal Al-Jafari, and many more. And this Friday, actually, or maybe early next week now, we are launching a view on demand or TVOD section. So you can basically watch a selection of new releases on demand without subscribing, which includes Memory Box, a really excellent new film by Joanna and Khalil, two Lebanese artists, and it makes me cry every time I watch the film. And Perfect Candidate by the Saudi filmmaker Haifa Al Mansour, and Luxor by Zaina Dora, and many more really excellent films. So that's enough about me. The filmmakers I will now introduce. So Alaa Mansour, we're going to watch her latest film, The Madman's Laughter, which was commissioned by Ashkal Alwan in Beirut. So throughout her body of work, Mansour uses video and new technology to explore the historical construction of archives and their active role in shaping political narratives in the region. So you might already be familiar, I don't know, with her earlier work, Ainata, which situated in the south of Lebanon. The film attempts to map the territory, landscape and stories of its inhabitants through the oral histories that they relate, and also the kind of more state-sanctioned archival material. And often these archives clash and contradict each other. So The Madman's Laughter has many of the same themes at its core, but it is much more ambitious in terms of its geography, politics, and historical narratives that it addresses. Rather than using archives to tell a story about a place, Mansour uses archives to tell a story about power and control in conflict zones in the region, as carved by these colonial military forms of image production and the data used to generate algorithmic biases. So the film uses archival found and primary footage from a vast range of mostly unidentified colonial archives. All the footage is, it's very textured and it's haptic on the surface of the screen, and the images dissolve between visual effects that mimic deep dream or the burning of celluloid. Equally, the faces of the characters or the people in the film are very difficult to make out. They are generally identifiable, but they're not attributable to anybody particularly or any place specifically. So this use of media, the way Mansour uses these medias, creates a distance between a viewer and the film. And it makes us question our ability to identify and perhaps sympathize with footage of violence, which is not explicit and not a spectacle. So Mansour describes the faces as borrowed, which I find very interesting. The faces are only identifiable as archetypes of Arab faces, AI amalgamations that don't look real at all. And I mean, that's the crux of it. The stereotypical views people have in the West of Arabs are not real or representative of Arab people, yet that is how we see and visualize Arabs through the popular images that have been used to generate these AI portraits. As Mansour poses midway through the film, who is looking at who? Another question that the film implicitly raises is, what do archives tell us about terror, with a capital T? It was, famously stated by Jean Baudrillard that the Gulf War did not take place. And from this point, Mansour explores the simulacra of the global war on terror from the first Gulf War in the early 90s to the atrocities in Abu Ghraib in the early 2000s, and then right up to 2017 with the rise of Daesh or ISIS in northern Iraq. So near the end of the film, Mansour states, "Terrorism is great," which is a shocking statement. However, this is quickly followed by a promotional clip of the US military chanting the greatness of the military in a bid to attract prospective soldiers. So basically the film asks, why is the former so shocking and the latter not? Especially considering the atrocities of American soldiers in Iraq, in Abu Ghraib. Because of this power, Mansour speculates, killing is legal and massacres are justified because the authority and narrative of Western powers. And that kind of runs as a kind of statement throughout the film. So Bahar's film, The Red City of the Planet of Capitalism, also really draws heavily on methods of new technology to explore the politics of geography, with more of a focus on urbanness and cityscapes. Bahar is an artist, a writer, a PhD candidate at Goldsmiths in London, And it's worth mentioning as part of her very extensive CV that recently she launched a research group called Weird Economies, which is a really, really amazing online art platform that traces economic imaginaries that are extraordinary to financial arrangements of our time. And it includes the Cosmo Financial Study Group, essay contributions, residencies, and events, all of which are available on the website. So back to the film. So commissioned by the German Pavilion in the Venice Architecture Biennial in 2021, her latest film revisits proposals for a communist sprawl in the Soviet Union of 1929, which was termed disturbanism. So just to go briefly into the history, it was originally developed, I apologize for butchering these pronunciations, by Mikhail Okichovich and Moshe Ginsburg, avant-garde urban planners. So disturbanism set out to eliminate the difference between city and countryside, basically by proposing a radical critique of urbanization. So for disturbanists, the sickness of the modern city and its centralized hegemony could be resolved only by the city's destruction and its dissemination across the Soviet landscape. So basically, to decentralize power, they envisioned an energy and a communication grid, or a sort of network of highways, infrastructure, mobile homes, natural resources, and public services on the scale of the USSR. So disturbanism basically would counter Le Corbusier's modernism and its attempts to resolve the internal contradictions of the urban setting by bringing the rural into the confines of the city. In the voiceover, we hear the letter delivered by Ginsburg to Le Corbusier, who was horrified by the avant-garde disturbinist plans. Reproaching Le Corbusier for his reformist vision of the city, Ginsburg articulates his communist philosophy of a fully networked life. Quote, "You do all this because you want to cure the city, because you are trying to keep it essentially the same as capitalism made it." So disturbinist ambitions were short-lived. Sorry for this long history, by the way, just because I needed it as well to watch the film. Disturbinist histories were short-lived. Okitovich was the first architect who was sent to the camps at the very start of the Great Terror. So basically, with the assistance of primarily of a 3D modelist, the video is constructed from really the small handful of remaining drawings and sketches published in the 1930 edition of the Journal of Modern Architecture. And with the closure of that chapter in avant-garde practice, their emancipatory imagination of network architectures found in the afterlife is found, what Bahar argues is found in the afterlife of the emerging field of cybernetics. Disturbanism and other unexamined network architectures recount the trajectory of our connected lives today and the contingent history of the web. So that's two sort of brief introductions to the films. I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you all heard me and everything all right. So I look forward to to discussing more with you after the films. Enjoy.
So thank you for this really interesting combination of works. They're quite, as you said in your introduction, quite complex works as well. And you did some unpacking for us, but it would be nice, I think, to hear even a little bit more about the context and the background for these films. I'm actually starting with the Madman's Laughter. I think maybe the term the military entertainment complex, which I know Mansour uses. Is this a term you could maybe explain for those of you who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so I guess if I can contextualize it within regional cinema because military technology is used a lot. And also in wider essay film, I believe it was Harun Faraki who made sorry for COVID brain, but he made this essay film called no, what was it? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? He made it. It's about the television bombs, where during the war, World War II, the bombs that were used by the kind of air pilot soldiers would film as they dropped down, and this was something that was then later applied by video artists, particularly in the region and particularly within the context of the Gulf War. So Janan El-Ani, who is a really great Iraqi visual artist, she made a series on how these how soldiers, American soldiers, would drop these bombs that would film footage, and also yeah, I mean, there's many examples of such filmmakers who've kind of used this, who've looked at militaristic modes of image production, but also the link to gaming with that, because I mean, something that Alani works a lot with was the fact that this this kind of software used by the military, by the pilots, was actually modeled off of gaming software by a huge game developer in the US. And the idea of sort of gaming and violence and the similarities between gaming, you know, between this software and the kind of military software, and also games like Grand Theft Auto or more violent video games. For example, Sarah Sadiq in her more recent work, her films are made on the same software as Grand Theft Auto. Her film that I'm thinking of, Koto Batenge, is not so much explicitly violent, but she basically shows how those kind of militarized or kind of those militarized bodies in the region, how they can kind of how they are visually reconstructed through such software. So yeah, that's a roundabout way of saying that there is a kind of massive intertwinement between military software, gaming software, and also I guess just modes of image production used in kind of new media. And Mansour really complicates the relationship between those different forms, as explored directly in her film.
Because there is an actual, sorry for being ignorant, but there is an actual kind of collaboration concretely between kind of the military industry, US military, and gaming industry, also in these games that are used in training, right? The military for these hypothetical wars, where they recreate war zones, and these characters or basically kind of racist imagery of this potential enemy, right? This is an actual collaboration that we are talking about. Is this also, I'm actually, because I don't know her technology, how Mansour is actually working with it, the imagery that we see at the end, where we kind of see faces in and out of abstraction in a way, would they be, which I find really very strong to me. She's kind of clear, she's emptying these quite coded faces of meaning to me. Somehow it becomes abstract, nearly like paintings. But how is she working with this technologically? Is she do you know her process? Is she using the game? Is she kind of manipulating the technology from gaming?
Well, I'm not the, I think that's definitely something that Alaa will be able to answer way better than me, but she's definitely using AI amalgamation, similar to the sort of techniques used by like Holly Herndon, who's maybe some of you know, like a kind of composer and also visual artist. She plays a lot with this as well. But essentially, AI will make an image or portrait of someone based on pre-existing images of that person on the internet. I don't know if you, but it never looks quite like that person because it is a mix of loads of different images. And then that's Holly Herndon's work. She like creates portraits of herself based on Google images of herself, but it doesn't really look like her, but it is her. So that's what Alaa is doing, but through searching. I don't know the specific terms, but she talks a lot about the archetype of the Arab face. So assumedly typing in something like Arab or Iraqi, because she focuses particularly on that geography. And so I know AI is definitely being used. As for if she is using specific gaming softwares, I don't know, but it's an interesting question. But she's definitely referring to that sort of history, whether directly through using that software or not.
I think I heard her speak in an interview. It was in French, so I struggled a bit, but in some of these simulation games that the military is using, it's the same face. They just kind of tweak it a little bit and change the clothing, but it's the same face being used for different characters. Like the enemy has the same face. Did you hear her talk about that, or just find it interesting that it's so?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. The enemy has
the different characters, like the enemy in this simulation games, or what they're called, that the military are using in training. The various kind of characters that represent the enemy, they have the same face. She talked about that in an interview. Is that something you're do you know have you
well, I mean,
heard her talk about
the
that?
enemies have the same face. I guess that just is an extension of the whole like archetype or stereotype of how of what a terrorist looks like, what an Arab looks like, and her just drawing attention to that.
Actually, I'd really prefer to open up because I must admit, most of my question is about your practice and not about the film, because you did unpack quite a lot for us in your introduction already. But I really want to open up for the audience to join in if you have questions about the first film already. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's even better.
With the microphone.
Yeah.
Hello, Róisín. My name is Mira Adonier. We communicated through emails a few times at the beginning of Shasha. It's nice to meet you in person now. I wanted to maybe continue, or maybe it's more of a reflection, but I definitely saw some of the, this serious games, Farouki's exhibition on the gaming technology, and Alaa, I can definitely see like a communication or sort of a dialogue in between these two works. But I also thought about what happened later on. I mean, with this aesthetic of videos created through war, I couldn't help but think about the ISIS videos that were retaken, some of the American ways of producing films, there's this crane shot, the color correction, this whole aesthetic it was almost like an inverted appropriation of some aesthetic. And I don't know, it's in this whole production of videos, footage from the war. I find that particularly interesting. So it's not really a question, but I'm just wondering if it's like a back and forth of an aesthetic creation or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. First of all, thank you for your question, and yeah, I love your films. It's great that you you came to the event. Yeah, I think definitely there is reference to the way in which ISIS videos are circulated. So, for example, Daesh, they had that app which was like Twitter. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a social media app where, you know, these videos were being shared, but also the way that, for example, new broadsheets like The Guardian would reshare these videos as reportage, but essentially, you know, they are sharing propaganda videos, and these videos are. I remember I was writing a paper on the how ISIS used how they used art in the black market as it was the second most profitable way that they funded the war. The first was oil, and the second was selling art in the black market.
Yes,
and a lot of sorry, were you saying?
Syrian artifacts, right? Like from Palmyra, and just sorry, interrupted you.
Yeah, it was the Assyrian artifacts. So how these videos were staged also, because, for example, there's this one video which is probably the most famous of the ISIS videos, where they're destroying a museum. They're destroying Assyrian artifacts, but really they weren't destroying those Assyrian artifacts, they were selling them. So they sort of like restaged destruction of Assyrian artifacts of like fakes, but the real ones were but they just wanted to create this video that showed that they were like storming this museum and they were destroying everything, and they were toppling down, you know, the empires, because obviously Assyrian art was associated with Saddam because Saddam appropriated the sort of Assyrian ideology and everything to validate his own self as the leader of an ancient nation, whatever. So yeah, I think she is definitely referring to not only to the videos ISIS make, but the way in which they are circulated and the way that they feed into this network of media and new technology that kind of exists online more than anything. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to think about that there with, you know, the relationship between her film and then ISIS films.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very dense film. A lot to think and digest about it. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else would like to continue.
I have a question. The assassination of Samuel Paty, the teacher in Paris in 2020, and kind of Macron, the government's reaction to that killing. I heard Mansour talk about this as actually the background for, or the starting point for this film. Do you know? This is probably also a question we should have her here to answer herself. But do you know about this backstory for the project?
No, I don't. Sorry.
No.
Sorry.
Could you tell us a little bit more about these unidentified archives that you talk about in the introduction? What type of archives is she searching in, and what do you know more about those?
I mean, well, they're unidentified, so I mean, it's like, you know, they are kind of anonymous, but it's.
What would be an example, or?
Well, I mean, it's a range of archives, from colonial state archives to sort of news archives and military archives and oral histories, and I mean, she always uses a range of archives in her work. And I think, you know, she always repurposes it for sort of political and historiographical purpose as well. Because, you know, these histories, or the histories that Mansour always tells, they're not the kind of mainstream hegemonic histories. They are subversive histories. So it is using archival material from more grassroots or sort of subversive or private sources that aren't necessarily the ones that are used or widely shared. But yeah, I think the way in which she uses archives to the way she repurposes archives towards kind of historiographical and political purposes. I don't know. I think I thought more about that than what actual names of each archive she was using.
Is this kind of where the counter visualities that she speaks about comes in, like the way she reorganizes or uses the archive in her work is kind of examples of creating a counter visuality?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the history that she is saying is countering, but she's challenging the way in which, terrorism is framed, and it's controversial. And I think the images, the way in which she frames the images next to each other as well, I think and the way that the film is edited as well feeds into that.
Do you know kind of what kind of audience she has in mind for this work? And how it's received? Can you say something about that? Is it seen as a very controversial piece, or?
I mean, I can't speak for her intentions or what she wanted. But I mean, the way it has been distributed was, it was commissioned by Ashkal Alwan, which is an amazing kind of arts center in Beirut. And they're kind of more, they're like very independent, and they're not really like institutional in the kind of Tate Britain sense, obviously. So they commissioned it, and it's available. It was then co-commissioned by this online platform, which I can't remember the name of, but then they circulate the film globally for free. So I mean, it's freely available, which is interesting. It's not like in the film industry where films are you have to procure through licensing fee, or even screening films. It's like you usually have to geo-block, or equally it's not only solely for exhibition in an art gallery as an installation. It is kind of made for, I think, the online space. Because it is an artist's film, but it was first released online. It's not an installation as we know it in it. It's not, it is a sort of an online installation, but it's not a kind of physical installation, physical space. So I mean, that's how it was. That reaches a particular type of audience, and it also frames the work in a particular type of way. It kind of evades, I guess, classification in terms of like industry. Like, as an art, is it in the art industry? Is it film? It kind of just exists online, which I really love, and it definitely feeds into the theme and the content of the film.
Could you, following up on that, could you say something about the way your interest, as I understand, you have a special interest in the essay format, the essay film, and its history in like lots of women in the region that you work with have been making this kind of hybrid formats that don't kind of fit in or working kind of in between in the margins. Like this seems to be important to be kind of that your practice is kind of in on the margins and on hybrid formats. Is that, have I understood your practice correctly, or could you say something about that? The importance of the hybridity to somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I love essay films. Um, I say this story a lot, but the way that I got into cinema was through watching essay films kind of on my laptop. One of the first films I saw from the region was well, not by film, I don't mean like, of course my family would have like, kind of really shitty TV on and musalsalat like all the time, but like, the kind of first artist film that I saw was by Mona Hatoum, and it was Measures of Distance, which was a 1988 video, really beautiful essay film, where it's like an epistolary narrative, like letters to her mother, who was in Lebanon, and she was studying at the Slade at the time in London, and the letters appear on the kind of surface of the screen, and then there's footage of her mom showering, and that really hit a lot of, I don't know, it was just one of those moments in my life where it just, I don't know, it just really hit me. And I mean, cinema is, I love cinema. There's nothing more I love than cinema. And I think that really just, there was something there. And then I guess, started researching more essayistic films because, since the early days in cinema in the region, and particularly women's cinema, women were not given the same funding or access as men. So there are more earlier, when men were getting the funding to make narrative feature lengths. There is more of a history of kind of women's more grassroots or experimental self-funded filmmaking. The discrimination in society was kind of directly reflected in the early days of the film industry, and still in many countries such as Iraq, where the industry is still very much in its kind of, I wouldn't say early days, but it's like it's being reborn. So yeah, I think that's why, like, I'm interested in essay film from a kind of historical or political standpoint. But
Would that
and that, sorry.
No, sorry, just curious, would that still be in the region? Would that the essay film still be dominated by women, or has that changed?
No, I don't think so. I mean, everyone makes essay films now. I think it's also a kind of privileged art form. Now, yeah, I know. I don't think the same applies. But obviously, every country in the region has a totally different film industry. I think the Lebanese film industry is so amazing. And there's constantly amazing films made by Lebanese filmmakers. And, somewhere such as, in the other countries, it's more difficult, such as Yemen or Iraq, where there isn't such like a long history of cinema, due to mainly circumstances around like war or destruction, just continual destruction. And I don't know why, there's certain countries where cinema sort of prevailed, and others where it had to be like built from the ground again, or indeed why. I don't know. I mean, this is just speculation, but yeah, it's every industry, and it's not homogenous. Every country works differently. And actually, Joanna and Khalil's film Memory Box, which we're streaming now in Shasha, is a really beautiful film about how it's kind of a narrative, but also draws a lot of archive film, and it's about how documentation, grassroots documentation occurred during the civil war in Lebanon, and how this kind of, I mean, this prompted the film, like all of this kind of videoing of what was going on and writing letters and taking photos, and how that also kind of inspired materials. So yeah, I guess it all kind of feeds into each other. But yeah, essay film, I wouldn't say is so much something that's gendered practice anymore.
What about experimental science fiction, which I know that you recently did an exhibition on with mostly women, right? Or am I?
Yeah, I mean, I end up just kind of working with women, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, the sci-fi. Well, that was mainly working with emerging filmmakers in the Gulf, emerging artists, because especially in the Gulf, there's this kind of association culturally with futurisms. Thanks to the GCC Collective and artists like Sophia Al-Maria and Munira Al-Qadiri and that whole group. And I think they've inspired, that trajectory has inspired a lot of very young filmmakers to also use to start experimenting with, art forms and new technology and futurisms, and also more narrative films from that region, which use sci-fi to say things that would not be possible explicitly. For example, Shahid Amin's film Scales uses sci-fi as a metaphor to talk about about how women are basically oppressed, which she kind of wouldn't be able, or wouldn't even be as interesting to show it outright. She uses sci-fi as a vehicle to sort of to explore that. So yeah, that was the recent sci-fi program.
You seem to be, sorry for all the questions about the practice. We can get back to the last film afterwards, if you don't mind. I'll just follow up with a couple of questions on how, your work more in general, because it's just really, I think it's very inspiring and impressive how you managed to found all these different platforms in not too many years, and you are obviously now being picked up also by bigger institutions, and I would be curious also to hear how you kind of work, if you feel like you can work grassroots oriented, as I kind of sense that you do, and with your politics when you meet, when you program for MoMA or the bigger institutions. Do you feel like there is a space for you and that you are heard and you can work on your own premises? That's a long question.
Yeah, so okay, sorry, excuse me, my thing is my washing machine is beeping and it's really annoying me, so I'm gonna travel over here quickly and stop that. Okay, it should stop now. Yeah, so basically, I work with a lot of institutions, and that's not a recent thing. It's been happening for years. Oh my God, it's still going on. Can you hear it, or is it just really annoying me? Yeah, basically it's not a recent thing, but I have only in the past, I'd say 3 or 4 years, been able to work with institutions in a way that I feel like it's a sort of fruitful exchange for me, and on terms that work for me, because ultimately, to be honest, working with like an institution like MoMA or Tate or the Academy, I was just I was hired by the Academy. I was in Hollywood for the early part of the year, and I ended up quitting because it just wasn't. I work with these spaces so with MoMA, for example, if it meant it was, I programmed their online program, and if it could be available worldwide, so not just North America, and if they waived the $100 membership fee, if it could be watched for free, and so that all of the filmmakers involved got paid double because they are in this kind of space, and ultimately could only ever really be an economic exchange. And I don't know, I don't really want to talk too much more about institutions because that's not where my head's at, that's not where my heart's at. Like, I'm more excited, I'm always going to be more excited by the work that we're doing in Iraq or we're doing elsewhere. Like, the institutional stuff is not the exciting thing for me, and it's not the big stuff.
Can you talk a little bit? Yeah, thanks. No, Shasha, I was just curious to hear a little bit more about Shasha, because I see from your webpage, that is kind of where you state clearly that it is kind of for the region, like it is with and for people from I mean, the region that you have defined, the Swana region, and not for a more kind of Western audience. Could you say a little bit more about the importance of that, or?
Well, no, it's for everyone. I mean, it wouldn't be available worldwide if it wasn't for everyone. And there's so many of us, in the diaspora, that I think it would be silly to just say only these people and this geography can use it. But I mean, I guess what you kind of referring to is that it's produced by people from the region. And I think that's what makes it really authentic and genuine, but also that's why it's still going. We're literally operating on like an absolutely tiny shoestring budget. But it's because, I don't know, I guess because people in the community really support us, and I didn't come into a streaming service and as investment banker. I came into it as a film programmer. And at the end of the day, like, it's just there for, it's for the culture, it's for the community, and they're the people that really support it. So I think that's why it's still alive, and that's why it's still going. But no, I do want it to hit everyone, and I don't I don't even just want it to hit film people. I want like, I think I've done events with Shasha. We only launched it last year, but I've done since COVID nomadic kind of film clubs in the Caribbean and in New York. And, there was virtually no people from the region in those crowds, but people loved like the films just because they could relate to the stories. And it's about not alienating people, not isolating people. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, here's a Egyptian film, and then suddenly that, because we don't go into a screening being like, oh, here's an American film or here's a British film. It's like, here's a film about love. Here's a film about flowers, whatever. So that's how I go. It's like, oh, here's a film about Palestinian. It happens to be Palestinian. So I think, people, that was a way to reach people who might not have watched films from the region, might not have ever visited it, have no interest, but they I don't know, they just like enjoy the film because it's like, at the end of the day, it's like they're good films. And it just resonates with people. And even screened films in like, I don't know, like the countryside of like Slovenia, or like just really random kind of places, but I don't know, people love it because that's what film does, I guess. Film brings people together. It doesn't matter about the geography or the politics or it's like, at the end of the day, a good story brings people together.
And people keep sending you material, right? Or do they still do that?
For Shasha, yeah. I'm always getting submissions from filmmakers, and I love filmmakers. Like, I could speak to filmmakers all day. Like, that's why I go to film festivals. Because I'm just so interested. But yeah, people send films, but also, I don't know, me and my team, we are just very much in the community. Like, we know what's coming out, we know what's happening. Again, going to film festivals, the new releases, what's going to be in development, what's in its kind of even in its financing stage. So we just kind of have our tabs on what's happening. But yeah, I'm also very open to people sending films. There's like a submissions at shashamovies.com for anyone who wants to send. Like, we're all very accessible, I think, in the team. Yeah.
We'll definitely spread the word. Does anyone have questions about either the practice more in general, or the last film that we saw?
Yeah, I think my COVID, I'm getting like, I think maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah, we'll definitely wrap it up.
I'm quite proud of myself for functioning.
You're doing so well. We are so grateful. And I guess I have a special interest in your practice. So sorry to take too much space with that, but you answered very interestingly. So about the last film, any questions about well, to me, it's a very complex film. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the way you are thinking, the way you think the two films are kind of talking to each other. Like the
I think they're really in dialogue with each other. I mean, visually, they're very in dialogue through the use of, you know, this kind of CGI, new media technology, but also the focus on networks and the way in which also political histories are sort of reconstructed through new media, but also through this idea of networks and how whether that be surveillance networks or sort of like familial networks or geographical networks, they kind of they both really feed into that. And yeah, I mean, Bahar's film is very text heavy. And I mean, in contrast to Alaa's film, like that was planned as an installation. And I don't think she's finished the actual, I believe it's going to be turned into an exhibition. I don't think she's like finished the kind of video, but she made the film first. So she's still working on the video, and I don't know, maybe it's going to be like, I think it's going to be like multiple channel video. And it's going to be accompanied by some sort of artworks. So it's interesting to think of how, you know, how it exists, how its meaning will change, and when it enters a physical space, because it does seem to be so perfect within the kind of online, within its current like online space, and also how that feeds into her wider work, especially with like weird economies, which I talked a bit about in the intro. And both of them very much being site specific for the digital. Not only using digital media, but the way in which they're distributed, circulated, seen, they are very much for this kind of, they feed into these networks.
If you want to wrap it up, we can do that now. I just actually, one last question, I know, which is beside every point. I know that you just recently wrote about how nobody in the art world has long nails. Can you say 2 words about why? And your kind of conclusion?
Yeah, so I wrote this article for Real Review, which is a really great print publication ran by Jack Self, who's an architect. And yeah, Zizek contributed, some other like really great critical thinkers contributed, and then I just like wrote an article on fake nails. But I don't know, I grew up having fake nails. My mom was a nail tech. I have my nails now, as you can see.
Amazing.
And I just think that it's so silly. It's very satirical, and it's very playful, and it's very anecdotal. But yeah, I don't know, no one in the commercial art world has fake nails, and that's what the piece is about. And I can speculate why. Yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of it's to do with class, maybe, or people actually have like, people do practical things in the art world, whereas I just like don't. People need to like hang up and install and like move materials or make, you know, artists can't have nails like this. Like they gotta use their hands.
Curators in the art world.
Yeah, but I work with videos, so I feel like I'm sort of, you know, getting the easier run of it. But yeah, it's just a very fun piece, which I've been, yeah, which it's very satirical, very fun.
Can we read it, or is it available online?
Yeah, so it's in Real Review, which is it's a print publication. So there's not going to be an online, but I write for Frieze. I mean, I have like online articles like every month up. I'm currently writing an article on which is going to be a feature in the next issue, called Thirst Trap Theory, and it's about thirst and how thirst is sort of a way to conceptualize the relationship between desert and water, between dryness and abundance, between hotness and wetness. and thirst is something that is political, that's sexual, that's cultural. And I'm reading thirst through films from the Gulf, which is, you know, a desert.
Exciting.
So yeah, that's the next thing.
Wow. Do you kind of really
but-
see yourself more in kind of placed in the art world than in the film world, or are you in between?
Oh no, I'm in between. I do loads of different things, and I'm not, you know, I just kind of move between spaces, as do many people, and many filmmakers. You know, filmmakers tend to move between video and film, and, you know, the art industry, the film industry. It's an easy shift to make.
Mm. This is very relevant to our programming here. We try to kind of connect these two worlds. Yeah. But I think I will just say thank you so much for doing this in spite of COVID and everything. It was really a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you so much.
We will follow you on all your platforms and spread the word.
Thank you, and thank you so much, everyone, as well, for giving me your time and for sharing in this space, and for engaging with the films. It means a lot, and thank you as well, Silja, for facilitating this.
Thank you. Okay, bye bye. Hope you feel better soon.
Bye. Thank you.